You know, I want to ask you, Dr. Manning, how does gaslighting from your partner when you've experienced and discovered betrayal, how does that compound things?
It makes it worse. In fact, in the assessments that we give for betrayed adults, that's one of the things we screen and assess for because we know from research that the higher the level of denial and gaslighting on the part of the betrayer, and also the degree of blame that is directed at the betrayed,
Mhm.
those two factors will exponentially increase the severity of the betrayal trauma. So, going back to the car accident analogy for a moment, it's like you've paid for insurance your whole life or adult life,
Mhm.
and you have that deep sense of hopefully trust that, hey, if something goes south, I can call my insurance company and they've got my back. They're going to help me. They won't make it easy. We all know that. They won't make it
For
easy,
sure.
but but there's a way, there's backup, right? And that's what allows each of us to go out and drive and live in houses knowing, hey,
Mhm.
we're covered. There's that sense of
Mhm.
I've covered. But what happens is if you call the insurance company and they say, we don't believe you, or this accident was all
Mhm.
your fault, Jill, we're not going to cover you. Forget it. You're on your own.
Right.
That would now take that accident to a whole other level. You're now dealing with a financial stress and now a double betrayal. Like, hey, I thought you had my back.
Mhm.
I've paid into this and invested in this for years. And now in the moment I need you most, you don't have my back. That's I think a useful metaphor for this is that you've invested in a relationship, you've been vulnerable, you have in many cases mortgage, children,
Mhm.
finances, trust, vacations, all these how we give of ourselves to relationships. And then in the moment that we find out that that person is not who we thought they were. And not only that, but they're blaming us for their behavior or they're twisting our reality to make us try to make us doubt ourselves or question our sanity. That takes it to a whole other level.
That's what I was going to
So
say. It's
in
right.
short, it makes it worse.
Right. Is that, this idea that you feel like you're going crazy when you experience betrayal trauma. Your offender in some cases wants you to doubt yourself. And, when they gaslight you, you do sometimes start to wonder, am I overreacting? Did I imagine this? Maybe it isn't too much of a big deal, even though you might have that hardcore evidence in front of you. You might succumb to that, right? Because I often say to clients, I'm helping post divorce who've experienced this type of betrayal trauma. It's like we need to build that back up like a muscle, like going to the gym, where, if they decide to date again in the future, and some never want to date again, but some do. And, that you trust your own intuition again, right?
Correct. And one thing I want to point out about gaslighting, I think it is a form of abuse. Let's be
Yes.
clear, right? It is a form of abuse where you are emotionally manipulating someone's reality with the intent of trying to have them act crazy
Hmm.
or have them believe they're crazy and losing their minds. And you and I probably, Amy, have countless stories where someone through gaslighting has been really cornered
Hmm.
and are doing things out of character, sending texts, behaving or acting in ways that are
Yeah.
very histrionic and problematic, even illegal. I've had clients charged or arrested for domestic violence in response to betrayal. That does not, I want to be very careful and ethical and clear
Right.
here. We are responsible for our reactions.
Right.
Uh, courts, as you know, don't take kindly to, oh, well, she's been gaslit. Therefore, we're not going to hold her
Right.
accountable for X, Y, or Z. So I want to make that clear and upfront. It does not excuse, but it does explain how some people's heightened
Hmm.
behaviors and reactions occur. And so unpacking in a nuanced way these stories is really important. And gaslighting is one of the first things in my assessments that I assess for. That's actually in the very first assessment that I administer is questions about that. And in terms of what we do when someone's been in this situation, And really, the first step out of gaslighting scenarios, too, is establishing safety. That is
Right.
betrayal trauma care 101. And I really want to stress that to listeners. There's three key phases to how we navigate betrayal: healing, and the first is safety and stabilization. We need to help this person ground their nervous system, kind of get back home to their own gut, take care of themselves. And
Mhm,
that can be even the most basic ways: showering, sleeping, eating.
mhm.
When our systems get thrown for a loop, a lot of those things get go out the window. So just even slowly, gently helping people come back home to healthy uh, routines, taking care of themselves is so, so key. And also practically building safety. That may be STD testing, getting
Mhm.
space, having a brief period of, it means sometimes not always brief. That's incorrect of me to say that. Um, Getting space, a separation, or just time apart, and slowly customizing with supports, hopefully, a plan for establishing safety. And safety can also include addressing symptoms. If someone's past history with an eating disorder has been
Mhm.
inflamed, they're now reactivated in that, or it's activated past traumas with sexual assault, for instance. We need to
Right.
carefully attend to those things and have the room stop spinning and the bleeding stop before we can do deeper work.
Got it. When betrayal ends up in the divorce process, right? As a divorce coach, I tell women all the time there are three parts of divorce: legal, financial, and emotional. And the emotional is the most important part. And that's one of the key things I do is to help them keep that in check, get organized, have a strategy, all of those things. And of course, so they're not calling their attorney every day and running up that bill.